Hey everybody, it's PJ from Wisconsin Air Gunners. I've got a little bit of a different kind of review today, and it's different for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, this is not an airgun review. It is a hunting video, but it's also a review of the TenPoint Titan M1 crossbow that was kindly sent to me by Pyramyd Air. So thanks to the folks at Pyramyd Air for sending this one out. It is absolutely, well, it's the best crossbow I've ever shot, and I've really enjoyed my time with it. But I want to talk in this video about how I set it up and what it's capable of. So let's roll that footage first. So as you can see, my environment right now is a little bit different. That footage was taken a while back when I was up on the backyard range in Wisconsin. And as you can see by the palmetto here, I am enjoying the warm weather down in Florida. I had hoped that I could combine the Wisconsin footage with some Florida footage of harvesting deer down here. Unfortunately, life events have gotten in the way from me being able to do that kind of hunting here, and so we're gonna go with what we've got. But that still gives me an opportunity to explain to you what I think of this crossbow and how I've set it up, and what I've done to make it really work for my situation. I like to shoot a heavy forward of center. I like that because I want the penetration. Crossbows like this put out a tremendous amount of energy, a lot of velocity. And so you can do two things with that. One, you can shoot really fast arrows, and there is utility to that if that's the kind of hunting you want to do. The other thing you can do is use a little bit of that velocity, or maybe trade off a little of that velocity and use a heavier broadhead in order to give you better penetration, ultimately greater lethality on animals. The other advantage of that, and I'll talk more about my setup in just a minute, but the other advantage is that if, and maybe it should be when, your arrow winds up hitting bone, that heavier front end has more ability to punch through and get to the vitals that you need to damage in order to ethically harvest big game like deer, in my case, whitetails. So let's talk about that heavy front end, shall we? The broadheads I'm using are 200 grain, single bevel, and as you can see, there's just one blade on each side, not the more, I don't know if traditional is the right, no, traditional is absolutely the wrong way to put it. This actually has a much more traditional arrowhead shape. In fact, the kind of shape that you would expect to see on something chiseled out of, I don't know, flint, obsidian, whatever else you can knap to get a traditional arrowhead. These are 200 grains. So with a 400 grain bolt, that brings the whole package to 600 grains. Now at the time I was setting this up, I didn't have an opportunity to check velocity on what this particular crossbow is sending this downrange at. Just didn't have the kind of chronograph that would measure that. But it certainly is putting out plenty of power. And as you'll see in just a few minutes, a little bit more of a close-up, you'll see that this has all the penetration you need. In order to make a broadhead like this work, it does require just a little bit of testing, and I want to go through that process. The TenPoint itself, the package I got from Pyramyd, comes with their own scope. And when you look through what you see on the scope is a 5-dot reticle, which means you have some options in terms of setting up your bow, zeroing it, and then having different aim points for different distances. So in order to use the scope most effectively, what you need to do is zero it at a fixed distance, whatever that distance, whatever works for you, 25 yards, 30 yards, 35 yards, you get to pick that. Now, I would pick it knowing my hunting environment where I'm most likely to be taking a shot. And you zero the scope like you would with any rifle. So you use the left and right turret to move the arrow so it's centered, and then you move the up and down turret so that it's hitting the mark that you pick. I will say, and I say this from experience, that at 30 yards, this crossbow is accurate enough that if you don't pick different points on the target, you will be buying more arrows. Actually, I learned two things when I started with this particular crossbow. One, the block I had to shoot into was not dense enough, and I immediately started launching arrows through the target, and I had to buy a second target to put it on the backside so that I could see where the arrows were staying or where they were ending up. The second thing I learned was if you don't shoot at different dots every time you load the crossbow and shoot, you will be buying more arrows. It's that accurate at 25 and 30 yards. Twice I did it and I wound up buying a new 6-pack arrows. So you're warned, it's a very accurate crossbow. But once you have your base 0 point, and again, I would set that where you think you're going to be taking most of your shots out in the field, then all you have to do is walk back, maybe 5 yards, take a shot, see where it's hitting, and what you're gonna try and do is figure out, okay, if I'm zeroed at 25 yards, that next dot down is 30 yards, or maybe it's 32 yards. But you continuously, well, not continuously, move, take a couple of shots, make note, actually write this down on a piece of paper, take a couple steps back, shoot some more, take a couple steps back, shoot some more. At some point, you got to go collect your arrows. But by doing this, what's really a manual process, you will know, and you'd make the decision. If you want to know where do I have to aim at 10 yards, then shoot at 10 yards and see where it is on that reticle. If you want to, and I don't know that this is a great plan, but if you want to take a 60-yard shot, go back to 60 yards and figure out where do I have to hold on that reticle in order to make that shot. So it's a manual process to set that up, but it starts with getting a good zero. And one last time, I would pick a yardage that is where you think in the field you're most likely to take a shot. Now in my case, I did that initially with the field points that came with the kit, and they are relatively light field points. When I switched over to these heavy 200 grain broadheads, I had to figure out, well, okay, is that gonna affect my trajectory? And anybody who's watching this video is probably shaking their head going, of course it's gonna affect your trajectory. You've got a much heavier arrow, it's traveling at a different velocity, and you absolutely are gonna need to make adjustments to the work that you already did. So I went out and I took a couple of shots with the broadheads. And here's the other thing that I learned. Those broadheads really, really rip through targets. You're not gonna do a ton of work with that. And what I had to do was go online and find some 200 grain field points. So I ordered a set of those, got them, put them on the arrows, and now, and I think this was the most important thing I did, and what I would absolutely say you need to do on your setup, you need to verify that the field points, even though they're the same weight, they're a different shape, you need to verify that the field points you're using have the same ballistic trajectory as the broadheads you're using. If you don't do that, expect that you will have trouble when you go out in the field and are actually hunting. So what I did was I started at 30 yards. I developed a whole new set of data for the 200 grain field points, and then I validated it at 30 yards, 15 yards, and 50 yards because I figured that was the range I was going to be shooting at. And what I found was if I used my data from the 200 grain field points and then took shots with the 200 grain broadheads, everything worked out perfectly. So I was good to go at that point. I knew my data was sound. So I was ready at that point to do some hunting. Utilizing the crossbow in the field is super slick. I mean, this is really cool. I've only owned one other crossbow. It was a recurve style where you kind of hand cocked it every time. It works. It certainly doesn't generate as much power as this one does. But this is like really cool as far as I'm concerned. You have a built-in crank, right? So here's the crank mechanism. Here's the actual lever. You pull this out, get your crank out, pop it on there. It's kind of like like a ratchet kind of deal. You got to put a little weight on it, and then you push down on a lever here, which releases everything. So once you have this released, you can pull this guy back out. Just makes it a little bit easier. Pull the actual hook out. That goes over. So once that's on the string up there, you just put this guy right in there. And look how easy this is. And all you have to do is just crank it back like you're reeling in a fish, but like a little tiny, like bluegill kind of fish, until the bowstring gets into the trigger mechanism. The safety automatically pops forward and it's cocked, and you can then release this. And oh, by the way, if in the middle of it you want to have it hold, you just crank that. But now you're getting that little, you can hear that catch. I don't know if, well, I can hear it. Anything in the woods would be able to hear it. But if you want it to go silent, you can do that too. Just put the release down, and then it makes no noise. But when it gets to the back, it automatically latches, sets the trigger, and goes from fire to safe. So it's an automatic safety. Then you just release that, let the string go forward just a little bit. You just have to get it kind of out of the way. Take this guy out again. Now this, if we were cocking it right now, this would be back here with everything locked in. Pull this out, walk it over. It locks back in just like that. You flip it up, put the handle right back in the bottom, and the bow is cocked. And once you insert an arrow, it's ready to go. The arrows from TenPoint, you'll see they're a 3-color. They come in different colors, but there's always one arrow that is a different color. That goes down, so it's real easy to orient. There's the nocking system. There are, I think, 2 different nocking systems sort of in the crossbow world. So you want to make sure that you buy the nocking system that works with your crossbow. The crossbow ships with a quiver. It holds 3 bolts. I've just got 2 in there, you can see. There's a little catch right there, and you just basically put it in and then roll that lever and it locks in place. So you've got onboard storage for 3 more bolts. So let's talk briefly about safety and then get into talk about this hunting footage. Couple things, if you've never owned a crossbow and you're watching this, you definitely want to know before you make an investment. Number one, you can never dry fire a crossbow. Don't do it. You need to get one of these, which is a decocking bolt. Make sure you have the right kind of knock. Basically, it's a heavy bolt that has this bigger, see, a little decocked it just a few minutes ago, but it's got this bigger front end, and this is meant to be fired into the dirt. It does not go in very far, and it will save you from wasting money firing your broadheads into the dirt. You don't want to do this. So you need, if you buy a crossbow, to make sure you get one of these if it doesn't come with your kit. Number two, these crossbows are extremely powerful, extremely powerful. And knowing what your target is and what's beyond it is very important. When I was doing my sort of experimentation with this particular crossbow, I had over 100 yards of fall off behind my target, and I was shooting from an elevated position down. So I had that going for me as well. And I learned really quickly that a powerful crossbow like this one from TenPoint requires a lot to stop it. In fact, in the testing I was doing, I wound up chewing through 2 lesser targets, and finally bought this Reinhardt model that is specifically made for crossbows. Supposed to be able to stop anything up to 450 feet per second, but you still, I mean, I would always back this up either with a hay bale or plywood or something like that, just because you don't want to find out you didn't have a strong enough backstop because something happened. So always make sure you're backed up. The other thing to really pay attention to is when you look at crossbow design, they usually have a place to put your hand. But on the other side, if you really look at it, there's always, almost always, if not always, kind of what looks like a shelf above here. This is to keep your fingers from sort of accidentally going past and into the path of the strings. If you think about it, you're using a string and some pulleys to accelerate a pretty heavy projectile up to really fast speeds. So you can imagine how fast this crossbow string is moving when it goes from here to its stopping point here. If your fingers straight up into that pathway, we're talking about catastrophic damage to your fingers, and probably an errantly fired arrow, and who knows where that would go. Certainly not into your intended backstop. So there are warning labels on here. This is a powerful tool, and I would strongly recommend you heed any and all warnings that you see on this machine, because if you don't, there could be, I would say, catastrophic damage. So be careful. Archery, and this is part of archery, is a lot of fun to be a part of. The hunting that you do with a tool like this tends to be very close up, very satisfying, and it's amazing. It's an amazing way to be a part of nature. So just make sure you do it in a way that keeps you safe and keeps everything around you safe. So let's talk about this hunting footage. Showed you a little glimpse of it before, but the area I was in Wisconsin was, I guess in some parts of the world you might call it suburban, but we were a township, and we were a township that was filled with neighborhoods and some commercial development. The town had requested of the state that they be issued what were essentially nuisance permits for deer within the town. A lot of people, some of whom fed the deer, some of whom just had gardens that the deer raided. And because it was kind of suburban, there wasn't really any hunting pressure and no predation. So the deer really were in a spot where they could flourish. My home was essentially on a deer superhighway, and it was not uncommon in the winter for me to see between 12 and 20 deer at one time on my 1 acre property. And when you get large concentrations of deer like that, one of the things that can happen is that disease starts to be a problem. And in Wisconsin, where we were, chronic wasting disease was definitely an issue. So the DNR, the state, granted those permits, and my property became one of the places where a number of archers would come and harvest deer. A lot of those deer went to groups that butchered the deer and then were specifically providing those deer to people who were homeless as a food source. So we were very keen to make sure that the hunting was done ethically and that something good was happening. And of course, we had the option to keep the meat for ourselves if we wanted to. But if we weren't going to, we had an arrangement with a group that we were donating to. In addition, all of those deer harvested were tested for chronic wasting disease, which was an important part of the management for that. So this was not what I would consider a recreational hunt. Based on the number of deer that we had on my property, I was just trying to be part of the solution. And again, thanks to Pyramyd Air for giving me the assist and sending this crossbow my way. The particular day that I was hunting, it was November, and we had some snow on the ground. It had been fairly cold, and the deer had really been circling up on my property. In fact, when I kind of cleared off my schedule and said, okay, I can go sit for a while and grab my camera, there were, right at that time, there were 3 deer on my property. And so I was walking stuff out to my shed where I was going to kind of set up to get out of the wind. I was turned around with my back to the rest of my property, and when I turned around, 3 deer had walked up on me. And well, let me just show you what happened with these 2 does. It almost seemed to me like the one doe was setting the other doe up. I mean, it was like she was stomping her foot, which is kind of a challenge that deer do if you've ever been in close proximity to them. They know you're there. They don't particularly want you to be there, and so they do that stomping behavior as kind of a, hey, back off. But it was almost like she called the shot. And I want to talk about why it ended the way it did. Let me show you this. This is what I recorded that day. So this is the exit. You can see that broadhead punch straight through. A little bit high for a double lung shot, but it did sever the spine and anchored that deer right to the spot, which was perfect for what we were doing. We'll try and show you an overlay, but the spine kind of dips down here. And I think perfection might have been, just a little bit lower, but certainly anchored it to the spot, which is exactly what we're looking for. And that heavy 200 grain fixed blade broadhead punched right through. That's right through the shoulder. I can feel the bone inside there. No issues punching through that. Both sides, and then the arrow snapped off when it fell. So the arrow went just a little bit higher than I anticipated, and I will put that down to, I honestly didn't think I was going to get a shot as close as I was. I don't even know if I was 10 yards away from the deer when I took that shot. I was trying to account for being that little extra bit close, and in the moment mental math that I was doing, I wound up loosing the arrow and it went just a little bit high. And the arrow actually punched through the shoulder blade on the near side, cut the spine, and then punched through the deer, the shoulder on the other side. And when the deer fell, the front part of the arrow broke off right about here, actually in the dirt. Like I found it in the dirt, just this part sticking up, snapped off, and then you see the fletching, which looks like it didn't actually go in that far, but it actually kind of rebounded a little bit back out. Not completely didn't fall out, but kind of backed up. So it made it look like it didn't completely pass through on both sides. It actually did, just it just, when the deer hit so fast, this dug in and the carbon snapped. Not a problem with the arrow. The arrow did its job. The broadhead actually was, the blade itself was salvageable, but in going in, the base part actually took a bend. So that one is no more. But the blades, I mean, the modern broadheads from all of the manufacturers out there are really good stuff, and they're certainly capable of being a part of multiple hunts if you are willing to do the maintenance on them. So it's a review. What do I like? What do I dislike about the TenPoint Titan M1? Let's go with likes first. I love the color scheme on this. I love we'll call it a paint job. I'm sure it's some sort of hydro dip, but I think it absolutely looks fantastic. The scope, super easy to use. Had all the adjustments I needed, no problem getting it set up. It was very easy. The cocking mechanism is, I have never had the opportunity to use anything like it. I'm an airgun guy, not an archery guy. But I thought it was super easy to figure out, very easy to use in the field, pretty quick, and I like how it works. I like how it's all on board. I didn't have to bolt anything on. It was really, really easy. This thing certainly has the power that you need for hunting. There are more powerful crossbows out there, but this one did absolutely everything I needed it to do. And in fact, from a target practice standpoint, it's actually almost a little bit more powerful than if I was just shooting targets. It's way more powerful than you need. In terms of what I might, want more of, the trigger is good, but not great. Crossbow shooting and the inability to dry fire it, and the power it generates doesn't lend itself to like testing trigger weight for you, which I would normally do in an airgun review. But the trigger's good, but not great. Every once in a while, and this is more a me thing than the crossbow, I would get this lever flipped the wrong way, which would release the tension on the cocking, the reel for the cocking mechanism. And so I'd get a little bit of wiggle here, or it would rattle around. Not that this isn't a solid unit, but I would get my hands on this and it would do that. It would like flip up on me. I just figured out I had to be more intentional about flipping the release switch back up. So really, really pretty minor stuff. You don't really need sort of that front stirrup, like you're not putting your foot in it like you are with a recurve crossbow where you're setting it down and pulling on it. But there were times where when I was cocking it, especially when I was shooting it a lot, I would have liked to have gotten my toe in there a little bit more, obviously without a bolt in it. But that could be just a little bit bigger. But honestly, I feel like I'm picking at the poor thing, where that doesn't need to be done. This is a phenomenal unit. It's still available. It's reasonably priced, and if you're looking at a first, or maybe if your first could use to be upgraded, I would have no hesitation sending you over to Pyramyd Air to pick up one of these. Very happy with how this has turned out for me, and I just wish that down here in Florida I had more opportunity to get out and do the kind of hunting that this crossbow would be perfect for. But who knows? The future's unwritten, and we may get back out there. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, everybody, and until the next one, shoot safe, shoot straight, and we'll see you around. Hey everybody, it's PJ from Wisconsin Air Gunners. Today, out with the TenPoint Titan. And we have, over my shoulder, on the backyard range, a deer down. I am stoked to bring this to you, and couldn't do this without the help of my friends at Pyramyd Air, who were kind enough to send out this bow for review. And let me tell you, she can get the job done.